Welcome to the Homegrown Economies podcast, a program from the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce in beautiful southern New Mexico. I'm Carrie Hamlin, the CEO and president of the Las Cruces Green Chamber. Homegrown Economies spotlights the economic impact to communities by local businesses, nonprofits, public lands, tourism, and the outdoor industry. Now, it's been a while since we've had an episode for you, but we are back to week's profiling and talking about those creative ways that they have adapted to the pandemic. Or we will spotlight those businesses and organizations that are connected to our public spaces and lands, the outdoor economy, and tourism. Today on our program, we feature two local personalities that are big in the biking world in southern New Mexico. We have State Representative Angelica Rubio and one of the co-founders of the Monumental Loop, Pablo Lopez. Together, they are coordinating and organizing the upcoming Bikepacking Summit taking place tomorrow in Las Cruces. The summit is titled Origins and Connections and hopes to bring together, The summit is titled Origins and Connections and hopes to bring together local, statewide, and out-of-state outdoor enthusiasts to discuss connecting the state's four major bikepacking routes and how to promote these routes in a way that supports inclusivity and equity. Both Rubio and Lopez are passionate about biking and making it accessible to everyone. Pablo is a cyclist and store manager at Outdoor Adventures in Las Cruces and probably one of the most well-known bike repair guys in town. I don't know if that's his official title, but bike repair guys or repair guru is certainly one of those names that needs to be associated with Pablo. Angelica's name has become synonymous with making cycling in the outdoors available and accessible to everyone. In 2018 and 2019, Angelica blended her love of cycling with her public service as a state legislator by riding her bike from Las Cruces to Santa Fe, our state capital, as a way of promoting cycling, but also a great way to meet with residents of our state before the beginning of the legislative session that happens every January. So Angelica and Pablo, welcome so much to Homegrown Economies. It's so lovely to see your faces.
Same here, Carrie.
Thank you very much, Carrie.
So when was the first time you both got on a bike, and what was that experience like for you?
I would say it was late for me. That's what my experience was, of being with a bunch of brother to a jock sister, a tomboy sister, and then having these really athletically gifted cousins in my generation. I actually didn't learn how to ride a bike till I was about 11. I was a big old chicken, but I hang my hat on the fact that I learned by myself, because I just was like, dang it, I got to do this. And I'm the only one of all of us that is still doing it today. So,
and you've made it
more gifted, but I'm still doing it.
And you made it really, I mean, it's kind of it's a career for you, because not only are you the one that people go to when they have problems with their bikes, but you've just done so much regarding the cycling community here, and just creating more awareness about it.
This town is just really cool, and it's very hungry and thirsty for different things. And I've just been in a place lucky enough to be able to facilitate some of, I guess, my talents as an organizer to try to get things going, whether it be like the Toys for Tots Christmas rides, working with Matt in the Monumental Loop, trying to move the bike shop into a different type of direction, more than just a bike shop kind of a thing, a meeting place, and the town is really the reason why it has the need. I am just lucky enough to live in such a great area.
Yeah, I hear you. Angelica, what about you? When was the first time you got on a bike?
I was just thinking about it. So I grew up in Lake Arthur, which is just north of Artesia, and that's in southeastern New Mexico for folks who don't know. And I just remember my dad took my nephew's bike. Him and I are the same age, and then went and traded it in for a bike so that I could have. And it was like this baby bluish bike with the banana seat. And so that is the first time that I can remember riding a bike. And it must have been when I was like in the 3rd or 4th grade, and I would just ride it back and forth in the front of our house, which was Broadway Street, which didn't have any traffic, so I could ride it all day, every day. And then I commuted a lot when I lived in DC. I rode back and forth from Mount Pleasant to DuPont Circle where I worked. And then it wasn't until I got elected into the legislature that I was just very sedentary, and that wasn't very common for me because I've just been an athlete my entire life, that I just decided, well, maybe I should just start riding a bike. And fortunately, I found a mountain bike. I remember taking it to Pablo for the first time. That's the first time I met him. And he just looked at the bike and he was like, okay. And then that's kind of where my whole like trajectory, this like third, I guess, generation of me trying to ride a bike came to be. And so here we are, where I'm now riding my bike up to Santa Fe every year, and I'll get to do that again in January.
I remember when I was in Germany, I think I was 7 or 8, and I got my first bike, and it was an orange bike, and I didn't like the color orange. And so I remember taking it apart completely so that I could paint it blue and then put it back together again.
Did you put it back together?
I did. I did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, it was really simple then. It didn't have, a lot more bells and whistles in terms of like shocks and all sorts of stuff. It was basically 2 wheels and a chain and pedals and a seat. So, it was good. So one of the things that I've noticed in the 30 years that I've lived here is that there's kind of been this difference in biking culture. We're still trying to be, as a city, more bike friendly, having pop-up bike lanes. But I'm wondering how you two have seen kind of the role of cycling, either like Angelica, you were talking about like riding, on a main street in your town, or out in our public lands. How have you seen that change or evolve? Because certainly with our public land stuff, Pablo, I mean, there's, I think, been an increase in that in terms of like, especially organized activities. But how have the both of you seen that the role of cycling change over the last several years?
I mean, I think for me, I can't imagine being in another city trying to get into the biking community. It just seems so much easier to do so here. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's still very intimidating. The cycling community is super elitist at times. And I think when we're talking about experience, when we're talking about, I mean, just having a bike is expensive, buying the things that you need for a bike is expensive. So it excludes a lot of people in that. But also in terms of like body size and all and all of that. Like for me, I feel like I'm representing a community of people who feel like, as someone who's a bit heavier than what
Healthy.
is considered like a typical, healthy, heavy, who's considered not as typical as the rest of what society thinks is right. I mean, I think I'm able to provide sort of a space for people to know that it's actually, we're trying our best to be as inclusionary as possible. And I think that's why my relationship with like Pablo and Matt have been it's been so great. Like it's been a really cool evolution over the course of the last few years, that they're these two dudes who are down for like trying to see how, not only how the whole culture is changing, but willing to adapt to that and not sort of perpetuate this whole historical culture that has been super toxic, especially toxic masculinity. Super masculine, yeah. And I think that's something that we are trying to move away from.
Well, when we talk about, sports and exclusion of women, I mean, I think about the first woman who ran the Boston Marathon, and she did it stealth. And then when they figured out she was a woman, then they attacked her. And so what about you, Pablo? I mean, you've lived here for quite a long time. And so what do you think in terms of seeing how Las Cruces has changed welcoming cyclists?
Well, so, the role of a bicycle really still hasn't changed in America. It's still seen much as a toy, where if you go into other countries, it's a tool. It's actually a way to get around. Trying to change that culture is going to be a lot harder than just bike packing summits. But in Las Cruces, the bicycle is a very, very handy tool to get around, and it's actually, beautiful weather, all that other good stuff. I remember when some of the first bike lanes were going in Las Cruces, and since then it's been increasing. But really, what took off, I remember, was when they built the multi-use path. All of a sudden, there was tons of bikes on that, and I was like, oh man, this is great, fabulous. there's families out there. It's great. You know, in neighborhoods and whatnot, you see a lot more kids riding. During the whole COVID thing, it's well documented that things took off for cycling. That had a plus side for, you know, some businesses. It has a minus side for the fact that we don't teach stewardship. So if you go out into some public lands, you see the result of some people not necessarily knowing the stewardship to be part of the community out on these public lands. So they leave a lot of trash, or they're going off of trail. They're trying to build new trails with no experience of even being outside. You know, there's still some things, but the great thing is the number of people that are even interested is good. Good growth. I remember when Lance Armstrong, of all people, was winning the Tour de France. Everybody started actually, instead of going to do business meetings on the golf course, people were showing up on business to do business meetings on a bike ride. So, you know, that's a change of the role in cycling as far as, like, you know, what things can do, but or what a bike can do. It is a great equalizer. It can take somebody who's, you know, very rich or very poor, but on a bike, they're the same person with the same cares. You know, no one wants a flat tire. No one wants to get hit by a car. No one wants, you know, everybody wants a safe way to get somewhere. They want better streets, those types of things. So the conversations are now going to be starting, I think, to have a real effect because there's more people doing it.
Right. Well, you know, I remember when my wife first moved to Las Cruces, and there was a stigma to it also. We talk about bikes being kind of typically seen as toys, but if you're an adult and you're riding a bike, I mean, she got accused, you know, somebody yelled drunk at her out their window because if she was riding a bike, it means she couldn't drive.
Oh my
Right.
gosh.
Yeah.
No, that's a status thing.
Right. And it's really interesting how, you know, she doesn't experience that anymore. And I think more and more people are not so surprised when we see somebody on the bike who isn't a child or isn't a young person. And I think especially as you talk about, and in part because of you two, because of this education that is going to be ongoing for sure, in terms of like bike safety and sharing the road, but also leaving no trace. And if you're out in the public lands and all of that. You know, I'm wondering, so Pablo, when did like expanding to mountain biking and going into our public lands happen for you?
I'd say it was about 1996 or so. I got a mountain bike to commute to work, but on the way to work was this place called A Mountain, Tortugas Mountain, you know, really. But it was like, hey, you know, maybe I should try riding through here instead. And, you know, lots of bumps and bruises later. It turned out that, you know, hey, there was this sport that was growing and it was very underground, you know, and there was like not really that many people doing it here. So you got to meet everybody that was doing it here actually on the trail. And wouldn't you know it, these people were all like professionals and into construction and, you know, just like all these things. And they were smart, and they were building these trails that now are still there without really going to any school on how to learn how to do this stuff. The Doñanas is a sustainable trail that was built by the locals. I mean, that is just incredible. The Tortugas Mountain trails, on the other hand, they needed to be redone because, you know, they were just kind of, I think it was like the first ground that they broke. But getting out into the public lands really changed cycling for me. It really made me connect to the land a little bit more and appreciate the land and the people that lived on the land before me. The plants that have been there 100 years before I was even around. The rocks.
Just a little bit.
Everything, you know. Yeah, thanks.
Well, you know,
it was everything.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tortugas Mountain, and I think, you know, it would be reckless of us if we didn't recognize that Tortugas Mountain is very, very honored and is something that's very important to the Tiwa tribe in Tortugas, New Mexico, which is a part of like the city of Las Cruces. For those who aren't in the area, the city of Las Cruces kind of wraps around Tortugas, which has been a settlement that has been here even before. I think Las Cruces was a city, and before the Gadsden Purchase. And Tortugas is a mountain. It's a small mountain, but it's a very important in religious ceremonies for a lot of Catholics in the community, as well as people in the Tortugas Pueblo. So I just wanted to make sure we put that out there because it's a beautiful part of our community. Angelica, you had mentioned that, riding up to the state capitol, how many miles is that for you, riding your bike?
It depends, but it's more than 300.
Yeah. So I'm curious because I remember when you first did that and I had expressed some concerns about the health and well-being of your body because of being on a bike that long. And you're going to ride again in 2022. You didn't last year because of COVID. And how did you plan for that the first time that you did that? And how have you modified kind of your riding strategy to do that again in 2022?
Yeah, so I mean, just to provide some context, I decided to do the ride because I felt, based on my conversations with Pablo, who was born and raised here, and others, is that there's just such a disconnect between southern New Mexico and our capital in Santa Fe. I mean, there's this whole saying that nothing works nothing actually exists below Socorro, New Mexico. And so,
like the midpoint of our state.
Yeah. And so, and you see it with our funding, you see it with all of that. And so part of the reason that I decided to do this ride was specifically to address that Southern New Mexico is a big deal for New Mexico, and that so many of our community members should be a part of these conversations. And so my first ride, which I don't think I'll ever be able to do any better than that, really allowed me to have town hall meetings along the way. So I started in Hatch, I got to Tier C, I went to San Antonio, I went to, I didn't do one in Socorro, but I got to the South Valley, and then on to Santa Fe. And each community basically received me, we had some really, really great conversations. And I don't know if I'll ever have that kind of experience again, because of course it was just the first time, but my hope is that with this upcoming year, I really want to focus on issues that are really important. So this year I'm going to do a different route. So I'll ride from Alamogordo on through Tularosa into Carrizozo Mountain Air. One, because there's so many rural communities that received outdoor equity funds, which I'm happy to talk about, but also there's this whole situation going on right now with downwinders and the people who were exposed to the radiation because of all of the hydrogen bombs that were dropped or experimented on back in the day. And so I want to be able to highlight a lot of those issues. And that's going to really be the purpose of my ride this year. In terms of preparing for it, I just have to try to ride every single day and just put miles on the seat. I mean, I feel like my legs, I can handle all of that. It's just really just how do I stay on a seat for hours at a time, but eating burritos along the way and drinking Coca-Colas, I mean, that really adds to make it that much easier.
Well, and I appreciate that. And your social media game is on point when you're doing that. So you are really able to share with folks who are cheering you on back home as you're going about your journey. And so you talked about the Outdoor Equity Fund, and we've talked with Angel Peña before about this as well. Tell me about like how that all began, because in the second half of the show we'll get into that and really the Office of Outdoor Recreation and all that stuff. So tell me about how, like, what was the flame, the flicker that started this whole conversation, because ours is the first of its kind in the country of this kind of fund.
Yeah. So it's actually the way that a lot of these stories that I'm involved in sort of happen. It's around like a kitchen table or at a local bar or whatever. And that's kind of what happened with the Outdoor Equity Fund. I was hanging out with our councilman, Gabe Vasquez. We were at El Sombrero and we were kicking it at the bar, and we were just writing down some ideas on a napkin because it was at the height of the governor's race. And there was all this talk about creating a division of outdoor recreation. And we just felt like we didn't want to become like Colorado. We didn't want to become like Utah and all these other Western states who were designing and developing their own outdoor recreation. We know and understand, and like Pablo mentioned earlier, like our connecting, how we connect to the land when we're riding our bikes, knowing that where we're actually riding, that for me is something that I actively think about. We wanted our division to be different. And so for us here in the state of New Mexico, we rank pretty low on a lot of different in a lot of different areas. And when it comes to child well-being and the welfare of a lot of young people, we felt like those were the individuals that needed to be elevated when it came to access to the outdoors. We know that neuroscience says that when a young person has access to the outside, the trauma that they've experienced in their life is much easier for a child to overcome when they're accessing the outdoors versus an adult who it takes much longer for us to do that. And so we took all of this hand in hand when we were thinking about outdoor equity. And we're already in the second year of providing funds. We're going to have my first panel that I facilitate at the Bike Summit will highlight some of the local organizations who got outdoor equity funds. And I'm just excited to highlight their work because I didn't really imagine the kind of creativity that people were going to have when it came to the Outdoor Equity Fund and how they were going to get young people outside. And it's just been really, really amazing.
Can you share some examples of those groups that have used the money from the Outdoor Equity Fund? And if you will, kind of clarify, because one of the things I think is so important about this fund is that it really hits Black and Brown and Indigenous communities specifically, which we have a great deal of in New Mexico. But also, as we've recognized, we're on stolen land, and we want to recognize the tribes that are part of that and the kids that are part of those tribes that have access. So if you will, kind of go into the specifics of the fund and then some examples of what they've done with it.
Yeah, so when we introduced the legislation, we urged the governor to incorporate it into the Division of Outdoor Recreation. We felt that was the mechanism that it needed to get through, and we did it. It was a hard process to get it done, but we did. And me and Gabe look back now, and we're like, man, I wish we would have asked for more money. We had only asked for $100,000. And that 100,000 has since become like this amazing amount from both private and public funding, which has now, after this year, we will have taken out 30,000 kids outside here in the state of New Mexico because of that money that we were able to, not only that $100,000 that was a seed money, the stuff that was committed by folks like REI and others, but also the fact
legislators
that
give money to it too.
Yeah, but to be able to have changed hearts and minds within the legislature. We have senators who were straight up like, oh, well, kids can just go outside if they want to go outside. Whereas now I feel like it's starting to change how people are understanding what the outdoors actually do, what it does to young people. And so last year, during COVID, you had so many organizations that were trying to have to be creative on how that funding was going to be spent. And so the funding goes to either municipalities, schools, tribal governments, anybody throughout the state. Nonprofits can apply for this funding. And you have folks like here that I'll highlight on Friday is FYI, Family Youth Incorporated. They do a lot of work, especially with kids who are struggling and have actually been incarcerated and are now are out and trying to just figure out their life. This is programming that they're coming up with is really to address those issues. Friends of the Oregon Mountains, they are also going to be a participant of the panel on Friday. They're going to be talking about some of the work that they've done with local schools. And then, of course, Centennial High School got awarded this last year, their program. This is the first year that they're going to do it. We'll have Eloisa Torres, who's a teacher from Centennial High, who will actually be talking about their program. And it's pretty amazing. Like, we used to play Mountain Air when I was in high school and in Lake Arthur. And the fact that they just got awarded money, places like Carrizozo and other places, like, it's really exciting to see. PBS Albuquerque just did a whole thing on Together for Brothers, that take young men of color outside on their bikes up in Albuquerque. Like there's all these different programs. You have Dreamers that are addressing health issues and the trauma that they experience as being undocumented. There's programs like them that are being amplified by who are becoming climbers. Like now they're like climbing mountains and stuff. And so it's really, really cool to watch.
Well, and part of that is because, as you had mentioned before, equipment is expensive.
Yeah.
And if people don't have hiking boots, and if they don't have backpacks, and if they don't have protective helmets and gear, they're not going to be able to do it. And we don't want people to get hurt when they're enjoying the outdoors.
And that's a good point, Carrie, because I think that was some of the pushback that we were getting from folks, is that there were organizations out there that were saying, well, we're already giving curriculums for science and things on how, and it's like, this program is specifically to get young people outside and to get their hands dirty and to play, because our kids don't get to play. Like our kids are having to navigate so many societal issues here in the state of New Mexico, especially, that getting to play outside is not as common as what some people might think.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your vision, and thank you for the napkin at El Sombrero.
And I'm so bummed that we never kept that napkin.
Oh man, so many brilliant things have happened on the back of a napkin. So glad that the Outdoor Equity Fund is part of that. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with New Mexico State Representative Angelica Rubio and one of the co-founders of the Monumental Loop, Pablo Lopez. Back with State Representative Angelica Rubio and co-founder of the Monumental Loop, Pablo Lopez. Now, Pablo, you and Matt Mason, and correct me if there's anybody else involved in this, but are the ones that created the Monumental Loop. And that is it exists on the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument, which was designated in 2014. And so can you tell me like how that came from an idea to reality? Because and how long is the loop? I think it's like 300 some odd miles, right?
So in its originality, it was 364-ish, somewhere right in there. And now, because of the difficulties that exist to work with local and federal entities, it was better served to cut about 100 miles off of that and keep it on a better route to where basically no one could tell us no. So smarter, not harder, won out in the long run. And the route came from Matt Mason, being his history as a thru hiker doing the Appalachian Trail and everything. It was like, well, why can't we walk this monument, because it's in 4 pieces that don't even really touch each other. Mm-hmm. So connecting them, he was like, oh, I'll just hike it. And then realized, well, that might be a little bit much. And so he got on a bike and started kind of doing these exploratory rides. I was doing a bunch of organizing, with bike races and different events, blah, blah, blah. And I had kind of burnt out my candle. I was just starting to say no after a while. It'd been about 12, 15 years of just always saying yes. So I said, I'm going to take a 2-year break. Well, me and Matt go bike packing one night, and he says, hey, man, I got this idea. And I know you're not organizing, but I could really use your help. And I was like, well, Matt, for you, I'll help you out. And then I heard the idea and I was like, this is going to take years of work.
Yeah.
And it sure has. But, is it still a reality? Actually, it's still not even a recognized loop, even though, the city has a thing called Monumental Loop Week. The city recognizes that there's something there. And Visit Las Cruces has helped us out with this bike summit a lot. They realize something's there. The BLM actually signed off for us to do the event where you actually ride the loop. It's now 250-ish miles. So it's still just not a recognized loop, though. So, we're kind of playing this ghost game.
Well, what does it need to be recognized when you say that?
A lot. For one, the BLM needs to just, be on board and say, hey, we're okay with this. That would be probably the biggest help. But if we could get it designated as like a national trail, that could actually really get it like some big time recognition. I mean, like big time recognition. And guess what? You need help with senators, you need help with representatives, you need help with local governments and everything. I mean, just it takes a lot of work to get this kind of stuff done. But so when you say, how did it come into a reality? You know, we don't know, because we're still living the reality of no reality to this
Right.
trail. We're not even an organization. We have a ghost board. So it's me and Matt. And we have Rubio, who helps us out with some stuff. And we recently added Colette Marie, who also is helping us out. She's new to the game, but man, she's got some energy, and we're really excited to see where we can go with this
So
now.
talented.
You know, so a lot of things nowadays are about marketing, and she can do that for us. That might up our game to get all these other things done. We'd like to see it signed. We'd like to have people actually mile zero start at the BLM office, like go in and check in and say, hey, I'm going to go do this. You know, let's have an actual relationship with the writers and the BLM and the local businesses. You know, the summit's about origins and connections. So origins, this is the you know, where it came from, but the connections part, you know, hey, this is what we're going to try to figure out. And we're excited. And again, Matt asked me, he suckered me in. He wooed me with an awesome bike packing trip, and I couldn't say no. So
Well, thank
here we
goodness
are.
for Matt. And he's been really well known in terms of the community, especially the bike packing and getting into the outdoors. And I would like to just kind of put it out there that I think we certainly have champions at the federal and state level that could help work on that. And you know, if that's the next step that you want, I think you know, full disclosure, I'm a state senator, and Representative Rubio and I get to work on projects that we feel very passionate about, and I think we should try that.
Yeah, and I will say Senator Heinrich's team have participated in some rides. I think there's a lot of interest from Senator Heinrich to figure out what that might look like. I know Senator Ben Ray Lujan is an active mountain biker. So if he ever does make it down south where we can actually take him out on the bike, I mean, I think there is plenty of opportunity to get it done. It's just a matter of what Congress can do at this point. I will also say that the bike, we did do a memorial for to connect all the networks for the bike routes around the state that we were able to introduce in 2019. Pablo drafted that, and so we were able to get it. So it's already recognized by the state as a network, and so I think we've done a lot of the footwork that is necessary to get us in that direction. So we're really excited about what that could look like.
Well, you know, one of the things that you bring up, though, that's always a concern, and this happened in Chaco Canyon as well, is whether or not to pave the road, because then there'd be more people to Chaco. And if we left it washboard style, then there would be people who really just wanted to see it and respect it. And so I'm wondering, with the Monumental Loop, and certainly feel very grateful to have Visit Las Cruces and the city all on board with protecting our monument, and our local businesses that have done the same thing. Do you have those concerns as well about people trashing it instead of respecting it and understanding the purpose for which it was intended?
Absolutely. And again, when, you know, I mentioned earlier about stewardship and the lack of, you know, it being taught, it could easily be taught in a school level. And it should be, in my opinion, but it's terrifying to think, you know, that like, yes, we're going to have a bunch of people going out there, but these are all good stewards and whatnot. As far as for the future, you know, we can't move forward in the right direction without that education. So we can set it up, we can control our own future on that part. The interest of getting off the road has grown quite a bit as a cyclist because of the advent of this thing called a cell phone. It literally is very dangerous to ride alone. I used to train a lot on the road back in the day solo. I will never do that again. It is terrifying. I'll go out in a big group, it's much safer. But more people are just coming off the road and onto the dirt. So there needs to be a transition in the way that people are having interests getting off the road. You know, you need different gear, you need all this other stuff, sure, but really what you need is to know that, you know, leaving no trace means no one knew you were there. Cool, put it on Instagram. They'll know you were there, but you know, just we need to really focus in on that kind of stuff.
I will say too, that's also the hope of the Outdoor Equity Fund, is that we are creating a new generation of stewards, so that the young people and our goal is, and Gabe and I and Angel have always talked about it, is like, could we know this program will have been effective if 30,000 kids across the state of New Mexico have somehow been transformed by the outdoors. And with that transformation comes that stewardship too, that they are the generation that will also like transform what the outdoors currently is, which in some cases is and not necessarily recognized by some as something that we should be treating right
with respect.
Right. I also want to say I recently became chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And so part of my efforts in that committee is to really address a lot of the things that Pablo just said, and how can we as New Mexico, a state that has a lot of potential, really transform the way that we think about policy outside of just roads, but looking at it from in all sorts of directions.
Mm-hmm. Still a lot of work to do, but I mean, what an incredible foundation that we have to really kind of do it right. And we know that. And so with the summit that's going to be taking place tomorrow, when did you guys think of that? Because you don't have enough to do already. Oh boy.
So it happened because we finally, you know, the Danger Bird event, which is the ride around the Monumental Loop, which is basically it's an invitation, open invitation that just says, come ride this. You don't have to ride it fast. In fact, you can take a week. Some people might take 36 hours. Some people might take 2 weeks to do it. And we just want people to come down and experience it. We actually finally went through the whole process because we knew it was going to be a decent amount of people that were going to do this, because it had been growing, to go to the BLM and work with them. And luckily, Ednet at BLM and them signed off and said, like, yeah, you guys can do this. So, you know, we were excited. We're like, man, this is going to be big. And, you know, you simmer on it for a little bit. And of course, then there's Matt Mason. And he says, well, dude, if all these people are coming down here, you know, why don't we just do a bike summit the day before? Sure, Matt.
Whatever you say.
Sounds real easy. But it was a great idea. You don't say no to that. It's just like, well, yeah, why shouldn't we have just a New Mexico bikepacking summit? Let people know that, you know, what Rubio was referring to earlier is the New Mexico Bikepacking Network and that House Memorial. The Department of Outdoor Rec and the Outdoor Equity Fund was all within a 12-month period. It all happened together. And that's, to me, just something stellar. You know, it's like, yeah, let's do shine a light on that. New Mexico's got it going on. You know, let's figure it out. We're not trying to figure it out. We're hosting a summit to, you know, the connections part, to let the people that are involved figure it out. So someone has to start it. We're not going to be the ones responsible for what is going to go forward. We're the ones that are inviting people to have a discussion about like what we think New Mexico could do better than any other place. And I'm really excited about that. And it was a great idea and a lot of work. Thanks, Matt.
Well, a lot of us have things to thank Matt for. And really,
I would like to add one more thing, though.
Yeah.
The Monumental Loop and this summit came from a budget of $0. We didn't, we aren't a 501. We're not even a group. We don't even really exist. This is just all done off of goodwill and talking to people in the right places that want to see this happen. Southern New Mexico said, heck yeah, let's get this going on. And all the great people that live here in Las Cruces and all the people that heard about it are traveling here instead of, for one, us going there. But we're doing this on literally less than a shoestring budget. And it's amazing to see it come together, because it's really what the Monumental Loop is about. It's about community. And again, and you hear there's the budget is zero. What else is there? It's community that's getting it done.
Right. Hashtag thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen.
Well, and you bring up the Office of Outdoor Recreation, which is still a fairly new office. And I know that Axie Navas has been very supportive. She's the director of the Office of Outdoor Recreation, very supportive of a lot of the efforts that have been happening in southern New Mexico. And she's actually said, you know, what we're doing down here is a model for other communities. And it's not just in terms of, you know, the designation of the monument, or in our case with local businesses, you know, having OMDP projects, but it's really this collaboration of people who are really skilled in particular areas, doing what they need to do, and then the rest of us like supporting what each of us are doing, because we know that it's for the betterment of our community, not the betterment of a particular group of people or a particular organization. And so, how have you seen the creation of the office kind of uplift? I mean, given what we've been doing, how Rubio, how do you feel the office has been doing to help kind of uplift outdoor recreation period throughout the state? And also what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful for Axie. I feel like she has certainly taken a lot of our thoughts and our ideas, especially when it comes to talking about issues around equity, really taking that on. And I think she also recognizes that as her, like, who she is can also complicate things. And so she always is willing to like reach out to those of us at the local level to really get some insight on where we go. I will say though, and this is where I think we're so different than other divisions across or offices across the country, is that we're just a special people. Like in Las Cruces, I was at a conference last week where folks who moved to New Mexico, say 3 to 5 years ago or so, like there's just something special about Las Cruces and the people that are here and the efforts that we are coming together on. Like what Pablo just explained around the creativity around the Monumental Loop, all the Thursday night rides that exist, all these different networks that have created, like the she-wolves that they ride. Like there's all these things that are happening that are very organic, but it's because of the spirit that exists here in Las Cruces that I feel like we make Axie's job like so easy. I also am biased in saying that here in southern New Mexico, we probably do it better than northern New Mexico, because I think we are just a special kind of people, and we're so excited to have her here. She'll be part of the second panel on Friday at the Bike Summit, but I think we make her job easier with the Division of Outdoor Recreation, because so much of our ideas are homegrown and they are very intersectional to the work that's happening with small businesses, with the folks that are just trying to figure out how to be more creative, especially in a post-COVID world where we have to learn to adapt. We have to learn to really figure things out in ways that we never really had to before.
No, and I agree. And I think one of the things that really set kind of the foundation for that is that, you know, when the monument was designated in 2014, the narrative that was used was that it's my monument. It's not the government's monument. It's not the state's monument. It's my monument. And I think because of that ownership, that respectful ownership that people in this community felt over something that was fought for at least, you know, 10 plus years, that's really kind of set the tone for people to really become engaged in whatever interest area they have that involves the monument. And I think that's when you talk about like something that makes Las Cruces special, I think that narrative really had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Oh, amen. Amen. And it's again, the word organic that Rubio used, you know, organic is that piece of paper, or excuse me, that napkin at, at El Sombrero. That's how most of these ideas have come about, that me and Rubio work on all the time, and Matt, and it's just it's hard to translate what the landscape looks like now than what it looked like 5 years ago when none of this was going on. You can't have a Department of Outdoor Rec. You can't have that without if you're talking about transitioning away from oil and gas, you have to have a Department of Outdoor Rec. You have to have a bikepacking summit. You have to have people like really into the outdoors as just one of the ways, and probably one of the major ways we can really do it. This is all Southern New Mexico ideas, the equity fund, the Monumental Loop, the summit. These are all from down here. And again, the organic growth of things is something we shouldn't take away. It can become very, very, I guess, driven by like governments or businesses, things like that. In its infancy, we need to build in these shells that say like, no, we need to keep it. And if we have to break it up into a bunch of smaller pieces to keep that tradition going, that's fine. We don't need to have control over it. We just want to spread it like, the idea like it's wildfire. Just like, come on, guys, you figure out what your community wants to do. We're just trying to figure out what ours can do. And if it can provide a blueprint, why not?
Right. Well, and I think back to when, really kind of it was, before monument designation and post monument designation, and, how, for the last 5 years in terms of the Monumental Loop, but, even before that, of getting businesses and, really being fortunate to do the work that the Green Chamber has with local businesses and sharing that around the country. I think we need to do a timeline of like our successful outdoor recreation industry in Southern New Mexico so we can, show it off. Because when Pablo, when you were starting to list off the things, I was like, oh my gosh, then we have the Girl Scout patch, we have the 1-year anniversary, we have monuments to Main Street created. I mean, so many things of this community showing how they see the value of public lands and all the different components that make up public lands, because of also the involvement of tribes in these discussions, and how this was ancestral land. And I'm so proud of this community because of that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
So with this summit, as we finish up today, with the summit, what do you hope folks take away from it? Don't leave your trash out when you're riding outside.
Yeah. Number one.
I hope what they take away from it is actually the title. Learn where it came from, connect with everybody, and at the very end of the actual summit, it's basically very low budget, like I said. So it's going to be a piece of white paper with a Sharpie. And I'm going to just ask people, what would you like to see next year? Hopefully they actually say bikepacking, like where we actually can actually do it at a place like, outside, on the land, do this whole summit somewhere like that. That would be great. But, I want them to form what it looks like. That's the first thing I want them to do is figure out like which things work here, which things don't work there, which things work where they're at, share that information. I want them to figure out what it's going to look like in the future. And I want them to tell me what they took away. So we are going to have a questionnaire sent out to them because we do want to provide data to places like the BLM and other entities that may not, be down to, play the game of getting this recognized as an actual trail. But if they hear this feedback continuing over and over and things are growing, they're just not going to be able to tune it out after a while. So we're going to flood them with love, and we're going to flood them with cool data.
That's fantastic. I think it's amazing. Angelica, you're moderating the one panel about the Outdoor Equity Fund, which has really been kind of one of your babies. And so what are you hoping folks take away from the summit?
I mean, I really hope that what people take from the summit is, well, one, I hope a lot of local people show up, because there are a lot of folks that are coming in to do the Danger Bird on Saturday who don't necessarily live in this community. But my hope is that they can see the local efforts that are being done. And by having people show up at Klein Park and just fill up the park with this conversation around equity would be amazing. But also just the idea of that building that generation of storeships. Like, I think it's important that those of us who live here locally are not only taking care of our community, but that we're also teaching people that are coming in to do the Danger Bird and other activities, that they take sort of this like spirit that we have here in Las Cruces to take it back home with them, because I honestly believe New Mexico can be a leader in addressing so many issues that are impacting our world. And if they just took a slice and a sliver of who we are, I feel like we could certainly make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I would add one quick thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Really what I'd like for people to take home is that why not New Mexico? Why can't New Mexico be the bike packing, destination? Why can't it be the leader? We're so diverse from north to south. And the native people that have lived here are some of the greatest engineers. They have learned how to survive and build things that are here forever. We can apply that. It's in our blood. It's in our air. It's in our dirt. It's in our water. It's in our food. We can apply those principles and really get this done, but we have to have these summits just to get people to even start talking about it. And if that's the thing that really comes away, that's the end goal of it, is why not New Mexico? Why can't we lead? Why can't we lead and let other people follow?
Some ganas.
Some ganas.
Bro.
Yeah, you can say that here. Well, Angelica and Pablo, it has been such a joy to talk with both of you. Thank you so much for all that you're doing and for being on Homegrown Economies. I'm so grateful for all that you do, and good luck with the summit.
Thanks, Carrie. Hope to see you there.
We'll need it. Thank you.
Angelica Rubio is the state representative for District 35, and Pablo Lopez is one of the co-founders of the Monumental Loop and the store manager for our local bike shop, Outdoor Adventures. More information about the Bike Summit, origins, and connections can be found by calling Matt Mason at 575-636-4952. Thanks for joining us on Homegrown Economies. We will come to you every 2 weeks or so with conversations with business owners, outdoor groups, leaders in the outdoor rec field, and more. More information about our schedule and the Green Chamber of Commerce can be found at locallascruces.com/homegrown. The music in this program